Let's begin the shiur. So first of all, welcome everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Levi Gourarie, as it says on the screen. First of all, big yasher koyach to Rabbi Krebs for putting this all together. What an amazing initiative of Achdus, of Limud Torah, of learning Torah together. I was just commenting before that it's unbelievable that this happened in our generation and this time when we have so much unbelievable technology to share Torah in such a great way. There's a concept that the Talmud discusses that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is makdim refuah lamaka, that Hashem always brings the solution before he brings the problem. So hopefully learning Torah together will bring the solution. So it's Parshat Vayakel-Pekudei. It's a double parsha this week, which we would have read if we would have been in shul. But we'll learn it together, and hopefully Hashem will consider it as if we've read it in shul. And the theme of the parsha is when in the past few weeks, we've been reading how Hashem, God, has commanded the Jewish people to build for him a sanctuary, a Mishkan. And in this parsha, this week's parsha, is when it actually happens, where Moshe Rabbeinu transmits that message to the Jewish people, and everybody gets on to actually donating the materials and actually building the Mishkan. And we know the famous concept that in Parshas Truma, when Hashem commands Moshe Rabbeinu to tell the Jewish people to build the Mishkan, he uses the expression "Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham," which means Hashem says, "I will dwell amongst them." And the famous Chazal, our sages, tell us that means that Hashem will dwell amongst the Jewish people. Every single individual is a Mishkan. Every single home is a Mishkan. And therefore, when we learn the parsha, and I'll share some insights into the parsha, hopefully that will teach us how to build our own personal Mishkan, our own personal home. Just before we begin, you're all muted. If someone wants to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself, and you can ask a question and then just mute yourself again, so there shouldn't be background noise. So feel free to make this interactive and comment and ask a question. Would love to hear what you have to say. So I'll share with you just an interesting insight, nothing really to do with the Mishkan, just right at the beginning of the parsha. Hashem, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu says, Vayakel Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu gathered all the Jewish people, and this is where he tells them all the details of how to build the Mishkan. So when did this actually happen? When did this event occur that Moshe Rabbeinu gathered all the Jewish people? So Rashi, the foremost commentator on the Chumash, tells us that it happened the day after Yom Kippur. The day after Yom Kippur is when Moshe Rabbeinu on Yom Kippur came down with the second set of luchot, the second set of tablets. Hashem had forgiven the Jewish people. And the day after Yom Kippur is when Moshe Rabbeinu gathers all the Jewish people and teaches them how to build a Mishkan. Now we know there's another event which also happened the same day, the day after Yom Kippur. And that is, we learned about this in Parshas Yisro. Yisro is Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law, and he comes to join the Jewish people after hearing all the tremendous miracles that Hashem had performed. And Yisro gives Moshe Rabbeinu, as any good father-in-law and mother-in-law, in-laws do, he right away starts giving him advice, mixes into his business, and he tells him that, why are you standing a whole day judging the Jewish people? There's so many Jews. Why don't you appoint judges and share the burden with other people? So both of these events happen the same day. And the question is, what is the connection between these two events? Moshe Rabbeinu gathering the Jewish people, telling them to build a Mishkan, and Yisro giving Moshe Rabbeinu this advice of appointing other judges and sharing the burden of judging the Jewish people. So it explains in a sefer called Pnimei HaTorah that the reason is this, that Moshe Rabbeinu gathers the Jewish people. He tells them to donate money for the Mishkan, to donate goods, to donate materials. But he tells them, you need to be careful when you donate money or goods, material for the Mishkan, you need to make sure that these things actually legitimately belong to you. That these are things that are not stolen, these are things that have not been borrowed from other people and you haven't paid them back or are disputed things. And therefore, when Moshe Rabbeinu tells all the Jewish people to donate materials and they have to be honestly theirs and they can't be stolen or borrowed from other people, suddenly there's a lot of disputes amongst the Jewish people. Suddenly there's a lot of court cases to have because everyone's disputing, does this belong to me, does this belong to you? And therefore all these court cases started erupting amongst the Jewish people, and that's why everyone came to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, listen, I don't know if this belongs to me, this person claims it belongs to him, she claims it belongs to her, and that's why suddenly he's overwhelmed by so many judgments, and that's when Yisro, on the same day, mixes in that perhaps you should appoint other judges. So a very interesting connection there of two things happening on the same day. Another very interesting vart on that first pasuk on the parsha. So it says that Moshe Rabbeinu gathers everybody, and he says, "Vayomer aleim," he says to them, "Eila hadvarim asher tziva Hashem lasois oisam." These are the things that Hashem commanded to do them. Now, we know that every word in a pasuk, every word in a verse in the Torah is exact. There's no such thing as an extra word in the Torah. Why does it have to say that Moshe Rabbeinu gathered the Jewish people, told them Hashem's commandments to do them? Obviously, why else would Hashem command us to do something? Obviously, it's to do them. Why is that word there, lasot otam, to do them in the pasuk? It seems to be a little bit extra, seems to be unnecessary, those words. So it explains like this, that sometimes we know when people have meetings, many times people meet and they discuss things, and many times there's no practical outcome from those meetings. You know, many people run board meetings or shul meetings or community meetings, and sometimes the meetings are for the sake of the meetings. Nothing actually happens from them. The pasuk is teaching us here that when Moshe Rabbeinu gathers the Jewish people and he tells them to build a Mishkan, and that means this is a command for everyone, as we'll see, that we all have to build our Mishkan. We all have to build our own personal Mishkan. This is not a theory. This is not a lesson in academics. This is not a nice vart, a nice shiur that Moshe Rabbeinu is giving them. He's emphasizing the reason why I'm telling you to do this is lasot otam, to do them. I'm not having a meeting over here just to make another meeting. I'm creating a meeting here to make sure that whatever I'm telling you here is to do. It's practical advice. This is your life's mission. This is what we're supposed to do as Klal Yisrael, as the Jewish people, to build a Mishkan. Okay, so the question is, how do we actually build a Mishkan in our own personal life? What does it actually mean to build a Mishkan? So the very first thing that Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people is actually to keep Shabbos. The first thing he tells them is that, the first thing Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people is that 6 days a week, take osem b'lacha, you shall work, and the seventh day should be a day of rest. And then he tells them one thing that they're actually forbidden to do on Shabbat, and that is lo yisvaru eish b'chol moshveiseichem b'yom haShabbos. They're not allowed to kindle a fire in all of your dwelling places on Shabbos. So first of all, just an interesting general knowledge you should know, you may not know, is we all know that there's a very big Jewish custom on Shabbos to eat cholent. Right, on Shabbos day to have cholent. And the origin of eating cholent is actually from this pasuk. How so? Well, it doesn't necessarily be cholent. The idea of eating a hot food, wherever the Jewish people were in the world, that's where it originated, the custom of what to eat. So the Ashkenazim make cholent, the Sephardim eat chamim, but the bottom line is that we eat a hot dish on Shabbat. And the origin is this, because if you translate this pasuk literally, it almost seems to imply that you cannot have a fire burning on Shabbos. In other words, even if you light it before Shabbos, you cannot have a fire burning in your house on Shabbos, which would mean that you're not allowed to have any light on Shabbos, which would mean that you're not allowed to have anything warm on Shabbos, even if it's left on the stove from before Shabbos. Now, we know from the oral law, from the Torah Shabbal Peh, from the oral tradition, that it doesn't mean that. It means that it has to be lit before Shabbos. As long as it's partially cooked before Shabbos, you leave it on the stove, that you can then have warm food on Shabbos. There was a group of people called the Tzedukim, the people who denied the authority of the oral law, the authenticity, the holiness of the oral law. And they would sit in the dark on Shabbos. They wouldn't have any hot food on Shabbos because they translated literally. They didn't accept the interpretation of the Torah Shabbal Peh of the oral law. And that's why, specifically to show that we're not like them, to specifically show that we do accept the divinity, the authority of the Torah Shabbal Peh, that's where the custom originated, to have cholent, to have warm food on Shabbat morning, to show that we are interpreting it as the oral law does. But that's just an interesting general knowledge idea. But why specifically this prohibition? We know that there are 39 categories of things, well, the 39 melachot, the 39 things which are forbidden to do on Shabbos. And we learn them out from the Mishkan. Anything that was done to build the Mishkan is then forbidden to do on Shabbos. And we sort of divided them into 39 categories, like harvesting, planting, plowing, and all of these things. So the question is, why the Torah doesn't say all the 39 things explicitly? We have to interpret it. Why is this one specifically conveyed to the Jewish people in an explicit way? All the other ones, all the other 38, are interpreted using the mechanism of the oral law. Why is this one specifically conveyed? So the Shalah HaKadosh, the Holy Shalah, tells us a fascinating thing, and I think this is actually relevant specifically in our situation right now. He says that fire is not, obviously means literally, that you're not allowed to light a fire, but fire can also mean disputes, machlokas, people fighting. Heated arguments is like a burning fire. People get very heated, people get very passionate, and obviously respectfully arguing is a good thing, but when it gets very heated and sort of people put down each other, that's like a fire raging. Now, during the week, people work, and therefore people for the most part are not together, and therefore the arguments are not so great. Says the Shalah, a fascinating thing, that on Shabbos, when people are home, there's more of a chance, and people are not outside working and families are together, there's more of a chance that there'll be machloikas, there'll be disputes, there'll be infighting within families. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu has to say, Lo yisavaru eish b'chol mosh v'seichem. Make sure on Shabbos, when there's the greatest risk of a fire burning, when there's the greatest risk of a fire burning, meaning the disputes, the fighting within the family, make sure that doesn't happen on Shabbos. Shabbos is supposed to be a day of peace, a day of rest, not a day of arguments. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu specifically conveys this command of Lo yisavaru eish, don't burn a fire, meaning that do not make sure, be careful that even though you're together for 24 hours, make sure that there's no fire burning. And an interesting debate, Yaakov adds on this, an interesting part. He says that if you look at the words, Sevaru Eish B'chol Moish V'seichem, which is the Hebrew for burning a fire in all of your dwelling places, if you take the Safei Tevot, which means the last letters of each word, it actually spells out the word Shalom. So you say Sevaru is a Vav, Eish is Shin, B'chol is Lamed, Moish V'seichem is Mem. So hidden in this message is Moshe Rabbeinu trying to convey to every single one of us that Shabbos needs to be a day of peace, a day of people being together, not, God forbid, the opposite. And I think it's extremely relevant, this idea right now, because unfortunately, we're not going to only be isolated on Shabbos. Many people will have to be together a whole week, which can be a good thing, but there's also the danger to that. The danger is that when we're stuck at home with our kids and our spouses for 24 hours, sometimes tensions rise. And we have to make sure that Lo yisavaru eish b'chol moish v'seichem. On the contrary, let's use this as an opportunity for shalom, for peace, not, God forbid, for a fire raging, any infighting or tension or disrespect that may go on as a result. What I want to do now is get into a little bit of a deeper idea in this command of Lo yisavaru eish b'chol moish v'seichem. And if you just bear with me just for a few minutes, because the beginning of this might be a little bit halachic, a little bit technical, but I want to share with you a very deep idea based on the halachas, the laws of burning a fire on Shabbos. So the Rambam, Maimonides, in his book Mishnah Torah, where he sets out all the laws of the Torah, the Rambam defines for us what exactly is lighting a fire on Shabbos. And he says, I'll just read it inside for you, I'll just translate it. It's chapter 12 of the laws of Shabbos in the Rambam. The Rambam says that if somebody lights a fire, even if it's a very, very small flame, then they are chayav, meaning they're liable, they have violated the Shabbos. However, he clarifies, that's only if they need the ashes. Meaning if someone just lights a fire to burn down a house, then that's not considered violating the Shabbos on a biblical level. Very, very important to point out that whenever we talk about the laws of Shabbos, there's the biblical level and there's the rabbinic level, and obviously we have to keep everything, even the rabbinic level. But on a biblical level, midoiraisa, from a Torah standpoint, if you burn something just for the sake of burning, you haven't actually violated the prohibition of burning, of lighting a fire on Shabbos. It has to be for the sake of the ashes. And he says a very interesting thing, that if somebody's very angry at somebody, and therefore he goes and burns his field, then he has violated the Shabbos, because then I'm not just destroying something, I actually get a benefit, so to speak, obviously a very wicked benefit, of the feeling of revenge, which sometimes a person feels good about, and therefore since you're benefiting out of it, therefore you have violated the Shabbos on a biblical level. But then he says like this, then he says, so too, if someone lights a candle on Shabbos, or lights wood in order to benefit from the warmth, no, even though he doesn't need the ashes, but he's benefiting from the light or the warmth, then he has violated the Shabbos on a biblical level. So too, if somebody heats up metal on Shabbos, he's also, in order to put it into water, to heat up the water, then he has also violated the Shabbos on a biblical level. Now we know like this, when we get into the laws of Shabbos, each malacha, each forbidden category has very specific definitions. And whenever you learn one of those malachot, whenever you learn one of those forbidden categories of work, you always need to figure out what exactly is the definition of, for example, plowing. What exactly is the definition of lighting a fire? The reason why it's so important to define it, because we then apply it to other cases where it's not explicit. So many times the forbidden category will be one thing, but you have to then apply it to a different case, a different scenario, where although it's very different, but at least the definition is the same, and therefore you're violating Shabbos as well. So what exactly is the definition of lighting a fire on Shabbos? And obviously there's going to be a dispute, like everything in the Torah, but let's discuss this according to the Rambam's view. The great Rabbi Levi Gourarie, in Tzofnas Paneach, he defines the laws, the prohibition of lighting a fire on Shabbos, according to the Rambam as follows, because there will be two ways of looking at this. One way is, the prohibition is burning something. So in other words, when I light a piece of wood, the act of burning the wood, that is the prohibition of another way of looking at this is the act of creating fire is, again, there's two ways. One way is the act of burning something. In other words, the burning of the wood or the wick is the prohibited act. Another way of looking at it is no, nothing to do with the burning of something. It has to do with generating fire, increasing fire. So the Rabbi Levi says that according to the Rambam, the definition of lighting a fire on Shabbos is not burning something. It's the generating of fire or increasing fire. That is the definition of the malacha. And he proves it in different ways. For example, he says, how do I know that? Because the Rambam says that when you burn metal, you violated the Shabbos. When I burn metal, nothing disintegrates. Metal doesn't burn, it just gets hot. So therefore, if the Rambam says when I burn metal, I'm generating fire, I'm generating heat, that is a biblical violation of Shabbos. That then means that the definition of lighting a fire on Shabbos is not about disintegrating something. It has to do with the very fact that I'm generating light, the very fact that I'm generating heat. That is the definition of the prohibition. If that's the case, then we have a little bit of a question. If that's the case, the Rambam should have ordered his halacha, his law, a little bit differently. He first should have put the scenario of when you light a candle for the sake of light, for the sake of heat, then you violated the Shabbos. Because that would define what the malacha is, what the forbidden work is. What is it? Generating fire. Then he should go on and say that if you just light wood for the sake of burning wood, but you need the ashes, even though you're not really lighting it for the fire, but you still violated the Shabbos because you need the ashes. In other words, that's the outlier. That's not the definition. The definition is increasing light or generating light. So you should have first put the case of lighting a fire for the sake of the light, for the sake of the warmth. Why is the first halacha, the first law that the Rambam says in Hilchos Shabbos, in the laws of Shabbos, of burning a fire, the halacha of burning wood for the sake of the ashes? Why is that the definition? So I want to suggest to you a spiritual explanation based on various Sfarim that really gets into how do we build our own home and make our own life a true Mishkan for Hashem. And just to preface, when we learn the 39 forbidden categories of work, we need to understand these things are not bad things. They're forbidden on Shabbos because Shabbos is a different type of day. We connect to Hashem in a different way. But the fact is, the majority of our life is not Shabbos. The majority of our life is weekday, and there's a reason for that. Because the purpose of creation is to bring Hashem into the world, and that's what we do during the week. And that's what they did when they built the Mishkan. The 39 forbidden categories of work, we learn out from the building of the Mishkan, which means these are holy things. These are things which enabled us to build a house for Hashem, to build a dwelling place for the divine presence. So all of these 39 categories are actually good things. They're actually holy things, if done in the correct way. It's just that Shabbos, we serve God in a very different way, and that's why they're forbidden. So therefore, all of these 39 forbidden things need to be interpreted also spiritually. What does it mean to light a fire? And therefore, when I know what it means to light a fire spiritually, I then know how to live my life that way and to apply that and to create a Mishkan, to build a Mishkan for Hashem in my own soul, in my own home, using the 39 forbidden categories as a formula of how to build a dwelling place for Hashem. And therefore, we learn like this. What does it mean to light a fire spiritually? we know the pasuk says, Neir Hashem Nishmat Adam. The soul of a person is like a candle. What does that mean? Lighting a fire means to ignite your soul, to ignite your neshama. Just like a fire always goes up, just like a fire burns upwards, so too our neshama, our soul, is always yearning to be connected to Hashem. Our godly soul, which is within every single one of us, always wants to connect to Hashem. Sometimes we just need to ignite it, or we just need to increase the fire. We need to awaken the neshama. Lighting a fire in a good way, spiritually speaking, in order to create the Mishkan means we need to inspire our neshama. We need to arouse the fire within our soul to go upwards, to have a yearning to connect to Hashem. That's what it means to ignite a fire. And therefore, the first thing the Rambam says is a very interesting thing. He says, Amavir kol shuhu chayev. If you light a fire, any size that the fire is, you've transgressed the Shabbos. Meaning, lighting a fire during the week is considered a fire, even if it's kol shuhu, even if it's a tiny fire. Now, in other melachot, in other forbidden categories of work, there is a specific shiur, a specific size that it needs to be, a measurement, in order to violate the Shabbos. For example, carrying outside, the Gemara says it has to be a certain size in order to violate the prohibition of carrying outside. Why is lighting fire? There's no measurement. A tiny bit of fire, that's considered a melacha, that's considered to be work. The answer is, now that we understand what spiritually, what it means spiritually, that when we light a fire, it means to light our neshama. There's no measure to that. In other words, every Jew, when you arouse your neshama, when you inspire your soul to be connected to Hashem, even a little bit is unbelievable. Even a little bit of connection to Hashem, you can't put a size to that. You can't put a measure. You can't put an amount to the neshama connecting to Hashem. Because when a Jew's neshama is awakened to connect to God, there's an unbelievable strength to that. And even kol shuhu, even just a little bit, is unbelievable power. Is unbelievably powerful. However, the Rambam says over here a very important clarification. He says, when you light a fire, when you light your soul, you need to knead the ashes. What does that mean spiritually? So it says in Likutei Torah that this is based on various works in Hakira and Kabbalah, that everything in this world is comprised of 4 elements. Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Ofar. Fire, wind, water, and dust. Everything. Even fire. Even the fire is comprised of the 4 elements. It's just that the dominating element is obviously fire. So he says that when you put out a fire, all the 3 out of the 4 elements leaves. The fire element, the wind element, and the water element. The only element which is left, which is the ashes, is the element of dust, which is obviously the most coarse, the most physical, the most tangible out of the 4 elements. What the Rambam is saying is that when you light a fire, it's only considered a melacha, it's only considered a forbidden work. And during the week, that means it's a good thing. When we light a fire spiritually, when we light our soul, when we ignite our neshama to connect to Hashem, when is that a melacha? When is that considered good during the weekday? Only when you do it for the sake of the ashes. Meaning, sometimes when we ignite our neshama, when we get very inspired, we tend to want to run away from the world, to want to run away from reality. Sometimes we stand Yom Kippur or a very, very inspirational day, suddenly we're aroused, we're inspired with this unbelievable inspiration. And what do we want to do? We want to just lock ourselves in a room and learn Torah and daven for the rest of our life and not see the world again. Sometimes inspiration tends to inspire us to just elevate ourselves in the world, detach from the world. Says the Rambam, that's not a good malacha. That's not how we build a Mishkan. That's not how we build a dwelling place for Hashem. Of course, we need to inspire our neshama. Of course, we need to ignite our soul. But the result of that is it has to be for the needs of the ashes, for the needs of the physical world, for the tangible reality. We then need to translate that inspiration and bring it into our daily life, into the ashes life, into the physical, tangible, coarse life which we live, and bring God into that reality, because that's the purpose of creation. Hashem did not create the physical world for us to run away from it. He created the physical world in the expression of the Medrash, La'asois loi dira b'tachtoinim, to make for Hashem a dwelling place in this lowly world. If Hashem wanted us to run away from the world, He could have just created spiritual world. Why did He create a physical world? Because He wants us to build a Mishkan. He wants us to take physical things and reveal His presence in that. That's what the Rambam means. The reason why the Rambam starts off with that halacha, with that law, is to tell us that when you light a fire in a good way, when you do it in order to build a Mishkan, when you ignite your neshama, when you inspire your soul, the purpose of that is for the ashes, for the most physical aspects of your life. And the truth is, for the neshama, for the soul, that's counterintuitive, because the soul is spiritual. When we're inspired, what we want to do is detach. But when we realize that what Hashem really wants us to do is to bring that inspiration down into the physical world, then we have no problem doing it. Although maybe the automatic response when someone gets spiritual is to run away from the physical world. However, when we know that this is actually God's will, what Hashem really wants us is to be in this world, bringing Hashem into the world, into the physicality, then we do that, even though it's counterintuitive, even though it's not the automatic response to a spiritual inspiration. And I think that perhaps just to relate this to our situation now, the situation in which we find ourselves is counterintuitive. In other words, we find ourselves in a situation where we can't go to shul, where we can't daven necessarily with a minyan. And sometimes we feel like, what does Hashem want from us? Like, are we doing something wrong? But we have to realize that actually this is what Hashem wants right now. What Hashem wants, sometimes Hashem wants for us to do things which are a little bit counterintuitive, which are not the automatic response. Hashem wants us to be healthy, and therefore this is what Hashem, this is the situation which Hashem wants us to be right now. What we need to do is we need to bring godliness, we need to bring a lakus, we need to bring spirituality into the situation which we're in right now, which is one of the things we're doing now, which is we're learning and we're learning together, even though we're sort of physically far away, but we're trying to bring godliness into the situation which we're in right now. Just to end off with two short ideas at the end of the parsha. The very end of the parsha, the whole book of Shemos ends off with the idea that Hashem says that when they traveled through the desert, it says that Hashem led them during the day with a cloud and a fire by night in all of their travels. And right after that, if we would be in shul, we would scream out, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek, be strong, and may we be strengthened, because we just finished the book of Shemos. First of all, why do we end the whole book off with that idea, that Hashem leads us in the day with clouds and by night with fire? And also, we have a principle that the end of something and the beginning of something is connected. We find this, by the way, with the end of the Torah and the beginning of the Torah. The end of the Torah ends off with a lamed, and the beginning of the Torah starts with a beis, which spells out the word leiv, the heart. The idea of loving another Jew is the really, with all our heart, is really the essence of the whole Torah. But over here, we have the end of the book of Shemos discussing Hashem leading us by night and by day, and the beginning of the book of Shemos discussing the exodus from Egypt, or the exile in Egypt, actually. So what's the connection? So I'll share with you two ideas. Number one is that the idea that Hashem leads us by day and by night is to say that Hashem leads us in every situation. Day represents clarity, represents light, where things are going well. Night represents darkness, where things are unclear, where things are not going well. And what Hashem is saying, whether it's by day, I'll lead you with a cloud. If it's necessary by night, I'll show you a fire. In other words, we need to realize that in every situation which we're in, Hashem is leading us, whether it's by day or by night. We find ourselves in a difficult situation, Hashem is there as well. And the connection between that and the beginning of Shemos is obvious. The beginning of Shemos is where Hashem is leading us within the exile in Egypt, one of the most darkest parts of Jewish history, terrible suffering in Egypt, slavery. The Jewish people are suffering a tremendous amount. And Hashem says, I was there with you as well. Even though it was nighttime, I'm with you there as well. I'm with you in every circumstance. And just to end off with one more idea, the end of the book of Pekudei tells us how Moshe Rabbeinu ended up building or setting up the beams of the Mishkan. People felt like they couldn't do it. It was too heavy for them, and only Moshe Rabbeinu was able to do it. And so too, at the beginning of the book, the Jewish people found themselves in a situation where they did not believe that they can be redeemed. It was so dark, it was such a harsh exile, they literally did not believe that they can get out of the situation. And the idea is, the message is that Hashem says, if you just try, like Moshe Rabbeinu, he picked up the beams. If you just try, I'll help you build the Mishkan. I will finish off the business which you started. If you find yourself in a dark situation, it's difficult. It's more difficult now to learn, perhaps. It's more difficult now to daven. The message of the end of Parshat Pekudei is, everyone thought it was impossible to erect the beams of the Mishkan. Comes Moshe Rabbeinu with Hashem's help, and he does it. Because if we just put our hands to it, if we just try, we do our little bit, then Hashem will definitely help us do the rest, and Hashem will help us through the situation. And Be'ezras Hashem, Hashem will end the situation, and everyone will be well and healthy, and we'll be able to gather together in person and daven and learn together. So a good Shabbos, everybody, and a big Yasher Koyach again to Rabbi Krebs for arranging this. And I hope everyone has a healthy, wonderful, spiritual, meaningful Shabbos.